Hello, and thank you for joining us for episode 3 of the Zscaler Virtual CXO Summit series, Productivity, Efficiency, and Speed, Why Digital Experience Matters. If you have any technical questions, please reach out to cxosummit@zscaler.com. This is a public session, and the opinions expressed in the discussion by third parties are solely those of the guest and not necessarily those of Zscaler. Zscaler does not guarantee the accuracy or reliability of the information disclosed during the discussion. We will be sharing the recording after. Please share and follow using the hashtag Zscaler CXO Summit. We are very excited to have you be a part of today's conversation. Please participate by submitting your questions using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen and responding to polling questions throughout the session. You will now see your first poll question. And now, it is my pleasure to introduce and welcome EVP of Customer Experience and Transformation, Kavitha Mariappan.
Thank you, Julia. Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you for joining us for the third and final episode of Zscaler's Virtual CXO Summit Summer Series. The new enterprise CXO priorities: protect valuable data, optimize performance, and preserve the environment. In our session today, we will discuss productivity, efficiency, and speed, and why digital experience matters. Improving user experience to ensure productivity is an important C-level mandate, but it is increasingly difficult to monitor and troubleshoot user performance issues as applications and infrastructure move into the cloud and outside of the immediate site of IT. That is where digital experience monitoring, or DEM tools, become a critical part of IT visibility. In a moment, we'll discuss the importance of visibility into cloud and mobile-based infrastructure, and to optimize user experience with our panel of CXO leaders. Paul Reyes, the Chief Information Security Officer from Vistra Corporation, and Eric Fisher, the Director of Enterprise IT at Growmark. Following this panel, Zscaler's Dhaval Sharma, VP of Product Management, will walk us through how Zscaler Digital Experience provides insight into the digital experience of employees and helps IT improve performance. But first, let's kick off our CXO Perspectives panel. It is my pleasure to introduce my colleague and our moderator today, Sanjit Ganguli, Vice President of Product Management at Zscaler. Sanjit, please take it away.
Thank you, Kavitha, and a huge thank you to Eric and Paul for joining us on the CXO Summit today for what I'm sure will be a very insightful and educational discussion. To set the stage a little bit on this topic. Now, this is a topic that is top of mind for many of the clients that we work with. It goes without saying that the world has changed. And the world has been changing for a while with digital transformation initiatives that many organizations have embarked on. And as money gets poured into these digital transformation initiatives, digital experience, or guaranteeing that users have a flawless, reliable, fast access to the applications and the digital workplace is critical. Now, at the same time, that challenge is that users can be anywhere. Users are working from home, and especially with COVID, even more so. They can be at the office, in a coffee shop, in the airport. And applications are also anywhere, in the data center, in the public cloud, the private cloud. And so with this massively mobile and transformed architecture, guaranteeing digital experience has become so much more difficult. Where do you plug in to actually monitor users' experience? So enter the world of digital experience monitoring, which is a new form of monitoring and a set of tools that have emerged that aims to measure employee experience from the perspective of the end user. So today's chat will discuss digital transformation initiatives at both Vistra and Growmark and how digital experience has influenced that and how these CXO leaders are going about making sure their employees are getting the best performance possible. So with that, gentlemen, I'll start with Paul. Tell us a little bit about Vistra briefly, and then about the digital transformation journey that you're on and how digital experience plays a part in that.
Sure. How you doing? And thanks, Sanjit. I'm Paul Reyes. I'm the CISO for Vistra. And Vistra is made up of 3 types of businesses: power generation, retail, and wholesale. And we provide power to the United States and across 20 different states, probably 39,000 megawatts to the grids. And we have probably over 5 million customers in our retail space, over residential, commercial, and industrial. And so we provide a lot of services to both customers that are paying customers for our services, as well as our customers being our employees. So as we start transitioning, through our digital experience, not only working from home with the whole pandemic, but our services are digitizing through our power plants. We have solar, you have battery solutions that are being deployed, like our largest battery farm in the world. We're providing services with very minimal resources on site through digital technologies. And so all of these require functionalities for people to be able to manage and understand and leverage all of that activity through wherever they're at, whether they're at home or in another plant location, monitoring another system in a faraway area. All of those require performance and expectations that our employees and our customers expect. So, and as you relate to, I don't know if you want me to drive into what are we using to kind of enable that?
Sure. Well, why don't we hear from Eric, and then we can circle back on the house. Eric, same question to you for Growmark digital transformation journey and how digital experience plays a part.
Sure, thank you. For us, since we're an ag co-op, covers all of North America. We have about 7,000 employees, and we operate, as you can likely guess, as an ag co-op in some pretty tough environments as far as connectivity. We have a lot of staff who are remote all the time already. So for us, the pandemic wasn't as much of a shift, honestly. For us, very similar, scenario for Paul. There's part of it that's internal that we are in the midst of transforming. We do a lot now with things like tank monitors and other IoT devices that give us feedback about how operations are happening in the field. But to Paul's point as well, staff, absolutely critical for them to be able to be productive from wherever they're at. So, and again, because our staff and our operations are really very spread out, we have to take that, extremely seriously. And, there's some things that are in our control and some things that are not. So, we try to control the things we can and then mitigate and operate around the things we can't. So.
Perfect. Thank you, Eric. So maybe circling back to Paul. So in terms of the challenges, right? So we've spoken about these new services that are being rolled out, the vast dispersion of employees and applications. Maybe walk us through some of the challenges you faced over, not even through the pandemic, but even before and after, in terms of being able to meet expectations of not only management, but also employees when you roll out these services.
Sure. Our biggest challenge around it is, of course, security has been traditionally looked at a negative view. The Office of No, or the group that's really limiting your capabilities. And we've seen that when we try to originally roll out a multi-factor solution, when we try to, provide a zero trust solution. And when we delivered those kind of solutions, when it impacted the productivity of our employees and of our customers, we felt that pushback from the business that says, hey, look, we're here to make money. We're here to provide services to our stakeholders and so forth. And so we had to find that balance to be able to provide that same security and posture while at the same time providing the performance. And that was really the start of us having to say, we need to get into that view to where we see what our customers' experience is. So that way, when we twist a knob here or turn on this function there, we know what that experience turns into as the customer is experiencing it through their journey through our network. And so that was really the caveat. We would turn on some services and find that we had a backlash and we had no visibility into why that was occurring. And so something as simple as, hey, you moved a pathway from one direction to another, and then you didn't realize that person had a direct IP address static route to another location. And so you broke it, and you didn't really be able to see that break happen until after they felt the pain. That visibility is what we were looking for. How do we do that before, so that way we knew what the customer's experience was going to be before we enacted it upon them?
Yeah, that's a great point, Paul. And certainly the balance between being secure and performance is a fine balance, because ultimately the best security is not giving access to anything. And obviously that doesn't enable any business. So yeah, great points there. Eric, from a Growmark perspective, I think you guys had maybe an advantage during the pandemic, given that you've always been remote. But I can imagine, though, that given the nature of your business, digital experience is a constant challenge. So what kind of challenges did you run into?
Yep.
Or have you been running into?
Yeah, no, it's huge for us because again, our staff is operating from some very challenging locations, and have a need to be connected all the time. One of the things that we saw, and we had seen this before COVID, but COVID really highlighted it because everyone was remote. You really found where the weak spots were. And for us as well, I mean, it was serving the customer to help them get the service that they needed, to run their operation and to run their business. But it was also really a help to IT to understand and speed up the overall process to see the issues, i.e. if I work from home 3 days a week and it's fine because my kids are at school, but now the kids are at home, all of a sudden, why, this application doesn't perform. So I have to dig into that and find out, I don't run his Wi-Fi. I don't know he has kids at home, those kinds of things. It helps us deduce much more quickly, where we're really fighting. And I hate to say it, but a lot of our users are not very technical. So their response to us is it's slow. And that's like the worst possible answer. And it's actually maybe the best one they can give because they don't understand the rest of the stack. For us, we have to take that very small piece of information and kind of track it down as fast as possible. And that's been the big upside for us with ZDX. Primarily, ZDX to us was a real good, bolt on because we were already a ZApp user. We had used it for ZIA and ZPA extensively. And really, it was really with the ZPA rollout where we really saw it. Pre-COVID, we had done that because we wanted to see, we could see where, certain users having a fine experience, but we could also get down to the handful of users who had really challenges. And we would try to proactively contact them just to try to dig into, is this slow for you? How is this working for you? And they really appreciated that. They really may not have been able to tell us everything we needed to know at the time, but it was still a very powerful thing to be able to look at that detail and see, see down to, the MAC layer of what their local network's doing. So yeah, it's been very, very helpful for us just to get a speedier response.
Yeah, that's great, Eric. And you bring up a couple of really interesting points. Today, slow is almost the new down. Right, the Apples of the world have made the expectations for user experience so heightened that enterprise IT has kind of struggled to keep up. And so you get these comments that things are slow, and that's very subjective. Slow could be someone's having a bad day and things feel slow, or they can really be slow. And Paul, to your point, the visibility is key, right? Because ultimately, without visibility, you're reactive, and reacting versus being proactive, there's a very different response, right? Reaction means, building technical debt sometimes. It means doing things in a way that aren't always the best for the long term, whereas being proactive, having the visibility really makes a difference. So at Vistra, Eric talked about some of the things that have helped with digital experience. What kind of things did you guys use to optimize digital experience?
So on our digital experience tools, I think the things that we were looking for is having visibility into the mass items of change that occurred for one reason or another. We're standing up plants, we're reducing our different sites and creating new websites. And so as we started to see, we really identify patterns, where is traffic going through, being able to find visibility into that. So those are the big items that we are now having visibility into. Another big one is we only do business in certain countries and in certain locations. So we were able to geo-block a lot of locations. So when things come outside of that area, we were able to initially, alert right off the bat. Without that, it was just a complete block. It wasn't an awareness of it, be able to know which user, which customer was coming from what location, and now we can. And I think that's really good visibility. When it comes down to the individual customer, what was real cool way, and sometimes it feels uncomfortable to the customer, is if somebody complaining back to the performance and says, hey, I'm at the house and I'm not performing anymore. This is not working. And us having the ability to say, by chance, do you have somebody gaming at your house? Because I see traffic coming through this location, and all of a sudden, boom, all of a sudden you see, so yeah, I have somebody playing a game up there. I say, well, you're eating up all the traffic at your house. And so for us to have that ability to kind of explain that to the customer and them feel like, okay, you just helped me solve my issue and it's not even your area. But on the flip, of course, it feels uncomfortable that we even know that, or we can have visibility into that area as well. So and it's a give and take, but it does help us, allow us to point where things like, as Eric stated, things that I can't even control, I can still have visibility into the full path. And that's really helpful when you're trying to really talk about facts rather than feelings.
Exactly, objective versus subjective. And Paul, I'm sure some of those employees might have been gaming themselves when you asked them the question. So it's a nice excuse, but they're quietly turning off Fortnite when you're asking the question. But you bring up a great point, right? Back in the day, and looking back maybe even 5-10 years ago, we, the kind of general we in IT, we controlled pretty much most aspects, right? People came to the office, they want to trust the network. We owned their laptop, desktop. We owned their network connectivity. The servers were all in the data center. We owned the data center. And so we had a lot of control, right? Today, and you brought this up already, the amount of control we have over the user's endpoint, over the network, over the application is minimal. You probably own the corporate asset of the laptop desktop, but that's it. You don't own, if they're at home, you don't own that local ISP connection. The internet's the internet. And you're not putting probes in Office 365, right? Unless you get a letter from Bill Gates. So maybe Eric, question for you, and especially because you guys are mostly remote, how do you deal with issues that clearly you have no control over, but are absolutely affecting your employees' ability to be productive and access the application or the service that you need to?
Right. Well, I would say we did do a number of mitigations with, I think we had about 40 or 50 staff who we ended up providing on loaner 4G hotspot scenario. Their wired connection at their house, whatever they used, satellite was just, high latency or just poor connectivity in general. Of course, that was in theory to be just used by staff, but to Paul's point, I'm sure it was a Wi-Fi access point for everybody in the house. And we can do that to a certain degree, but really it was the feedback loop to say, this is a mitigation step to you, Mr. Staff person. You should upgrade the bandwidth at your house and or decide to go, find a third-party location. I don't know if it's a library, COVID obviously limits some of that, but because of policy, and again, to your point, there's a cost component too, we were not going to go taking over everybody's home internet. And just honestly, in our markets, with some of our locations, there is only one option in town or in the area, so to speak. And really 4G didn't solve everybody's issues. We had some people who did have to go to another location just to get solid connectivity to be able to work, functionally from home. But the good news is, especially with ZPA, is it's extremely tolerant of poor connections. We have seen the worst you can possibly, pay for, pretty much, and it's been very resilient, very tolerant. So it's a trade-off. I think, to your point about not being able to control as much or even have visibility into as much, our role sometimes, the response of the customer isn't that, you can't do anything, just that you know what you know, and the things that you're looking at that are out of your control, educating them at least is a better response to them than saying you're out of luck. They at least have an idea of where to start to then go to the next step on their side, potentially to mitigate it. But in fact, we've had all those 4G Wi-Fi's back now, so made it to the other side.
Yep. That's perfect. And maybe kind of shifting gears a little bit, right? So, the visibility is great. Now, what we've seen in a lot of organizations, and I would love to hear your perspective on this as leaders in both of your orgs, is that once you do have this slow and you've verified things are slow, there tends to be, either cultural, political, hot potato routing between the desktop team, the network team, the application team, the security team. Who owns this? Whose fault is it? Where does it sit? I'm a network guy. I tend to feel things come to the network guys first, right? And this prove you're innocent, and then it goes on. How do you, to Paul, maybe, is that an issue? And then how does the digital experience monitoring help, or does it help with easing some of that, the triage aspect of dealing with some of these issues?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think be honest, I haven't been to a company, including my own right now, that's mature in that space, right? Everybody wants to say and feel that their area is working, and because I got the next thing I'm working on, right? And so teams, just tend to lean towards a hot potato. No, it's not mine, it's not yours, you're pointing your fingers. But what it does do, and we're growing and improving in this area where we were able to wrap around data. So we, have both our SIM type of data that we have in the tool, and we have our DEM, data that's in our tools. And we both now look at just data and then say, okay, out of this, how do we want to help our customers? And so it does help the conversation, especially with teams. And then being remote, I hate to say it, but being remote, being on a call and being able to look at each other on a Zoom and looking at data all together, it has helped that conversation, right? And so before you'd have to go track people down in different offices, but here we're getting all the same. You're looking at the data, you're scrolling through it and says, okay, yeah, we both can see this. This is either at our access point, or it's at our SD-WAN, and the conversations are a lot more civil because we're looking at the same data. And I think that's what helped the conversation so far.
That's actually really interesting. The fact that we're all can join. There's no side water cooler conversation. Everyone's on the same page. Everyone's looking at the same screen. Actually helps collaboration, which is, that's fascinating. That's an interesting side effect of an unfortunate situation. That's really interesting. Eric, how about for you? How are the kind of the hot potato blame game? Has DEM helped with some of that, and were those challenges to begin with?
Yep. Yeah, no, it's definitely helped. We have endpoint tools. We have some other third-party monitoring tools we use, but the ZDX tool specifically helps us correlate those, validate the other signals we're getting, as well as stitch together some of the components that aren't as clear. And now I think with the track record that we've had with it, the desktop teams, the network teams, everybody knows that it's helped us a number of times. So I think everybody's now become more reliant on it. They believe in it. And to Paul's point about, the data doesn't lie, it's proven out over time. So it's reduced that, the finger pointing and not me kind of piece to it. I think it's helped stitch the team together to understand, really at the end of the day, we're just trying to help the customer, right? Whatever it takes to do that. Sometimes it's some processes run away with the CPU on the machine. Sometimes it's a Wi-Fi access point that's, not performing well. But at least we can get to what I consider a consensus agreement a lot faster. And again, it's all about, speed on that resolution. So.
Yeah, exactly. A great point. It's truly at the end of the day about the customer, right? It's about them being productive. And so however you can get to that point makes all the difference. Now, Paul, walk me a little bit through kind of the this is a tough word to say, operationalization of some of this, right? You have now visibility, you have data. How do you figure out where the data goes, right? Is this a help desk that looks at some of the data? Does it go to your level 2 folks, your level 3 folks? When does the security team step in? How did you figure out how to, once you had the data, through ZDX or really any kind of DEM product, how did you figure out the best way to make use of it across the way that your organization was set up?
Yeah, for us, we did, all three: people, process, and technology. From the people perspective, we made it clear that we use human performance improvement, meaning that there's no blame fixing, right? We made it clear that anybody can pull the cord, call everybody on the bridge if you want to discuss something, and if it's impacting the customer, whoever needs to pull and bring in the on-call folks, they can, right? And there's no issue with that. So we have to make it very clear around the ability to pull the cord and call in people without any issues. The process side of the house is we had to stop and say, let's clearly identify, what's the impact of and the process we're going to go through and what data we're going to look at. And so each team, we're knowing that, we're using our SIM and everything's going to feed the SIM so that when we do our reporting, it's coming from a central location, then everybody's putting their data into the SIM, right? Or whichever the data repository for what we're looking for, we all agree on what is that, truth, if you will. And then the technology wise is everybody's going to bring their tech to the plate. And then when they do, we got to all agree, is this a one-sided fix, and then we're going to go down that route. We're going to fix that tech, and then if it doesn't work, we'll then shift and work on the next. There's no blame fixing around that again, as we go through. And I think when we look at it that way, everybody says, all right, we're all, back to your point earlier, we're all here for the customer, and how do we learn from each time that we go through? But I think the centralization of data is the most impactful piece, because everybody's looking at the same info.
Right. The data doesn't lie, right? The data is the
Right.
ultimate source of truth. Now, Eric, how about for you? Same question. How do you get this data in the right hands with the right levels, looking at the right to optimally, get to the solving customer issues as seamlessly as possible?
Right. Right now, the tool lives with our network team primarily because, to your point, the network is always down, right? So that's where you always start. We treat it as a tier 2 component of how we approach support. We do feed it into a SIM, but at the same time, we found a lot more value in augmenting our traditional help desk process. So if we get to a point where we really can't follow further, the ZDX feedback is basically what they go to. It does take a little bit of time for us to get that digested by that tier 1 team, but they're used to it now. I mean, we've had it in place for about 8 months or so, 7-8 months. So they're pretty used to that flow. And really, they really appreciate it because, again, it speeds up their processes substantially. It used to be they had a number of things they would want to do, maybe do a remote session to inspect the machine remotely and get into the weeds, which is always a bit of a one-off custom scenario anyway, depending on the skills of the individual staff person. ZDX kind of speeds that whole thing up and provides a lot more transparency. So it's been integrated, pretty thoroughly with the support teams now. So I'm very happy with it.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you, Eric. So let's talk a little bit about, and maybe to you, Paul, first, and this came up kind of early on as well. Balancing the security aspect and performance is always a fine balancing act. At the end of the day, experience comes first, but it has to be secure as well. How do you set proper expectations with your customers and I guess employees around, the fact that there is security. We're also monitoring performance. And how do you balance that in such a way that they understand where you're coming from and there is no backlash, like you said, when new things are rolled out? How did you balance that so seamlessly?
Yeah, I think it's critical for senior leadership to be all on the same page from top down. And our CEO, from our board down to CEO, and all the senior leaderships are all on board around, let's make sure we're balancing appropriately. And so giving direction around, okay, here is what our options are. Do we, cut off everybody from any device if we don't manage it, or do we want to go to a zero trust and leverage from any device anywhere? But this is the risk, right? In each of those scenarios, we got to really communicate out that first. And once we get to an agreement from the top down around that, then we just communicate out, this is how we're going to proceed. And then always remember that as we go and proceed down that direction, whatever that restriction or process or standard that we go with, how do we, measure the customer's experience along that way? Because we have made decisions where we, shift really hard into the security piece. And then, let's say when we did multi-factor, and then all of a sudden it was a very difficult customer experience process. And we ended up having to pull it back and then say, okay, let's go rethink this. Let's go do an easier solution for multi-factor. And then boom, we'll get there. But I think that's the same way with our traffic and data. As we were heading down the zero trust model with this right before COVID hit, and thank goodness we had already did the design, we had already did the configuration around that, and we already started down a digital monitoring experience that when it all happened, we just turned it all on, and it, thank goodness it was all in the right direction. And so that's what enabled us, but it does start from the top down. You got to get agreement from all your senior leaders so that when the questions pop up within each ranks, we're all talking the same thing.
Yeah, that's great advice. Eric, how about from your perspective?
Yeah, I would echo that entirely. Top-down understanding, alignment, education for them to understand the risk profile and what's out there and what they have to, address both regulatory from a compliance point of view, as well as really just the threat environment that's out there. That's absolutely critical to get right, obviously. But I've found, and the MFA is a trigger for me because we did the same thing, and ironically, and maybe this is just a development. over time, these tools, we use Okta from FA, we use, ZPA obviously from Zscaler. Those kinds of tools, are getting us both, the security, stance we want to have, but then the friction is not that bad. I mean, it used to be pretty brutal for some of these tools to get deployed, and we are getting a lot. I would say the trade-off, and I think I even told you this earlier, the trade-off on the security side is huge. If I had a little bit of friction, I mean, that's the balance that my leadership is all on board with, right? I mean, they have to have the security piece. And if I can minimize the friction, everyone understands that, even though the internet is free, as everyone knows, right? IT is hard. It's magic to a lot of people. So for them to understand why we have to do it, what the trade-off is, and really what you're asking staff to, do, customers to do. If they have a good handle on it and understand that trade-off, it's been pretty easy on the change management side. So, but it's an ongoing thing, because the threat landscape changes a lot. We have to keep that dialogue and that communication going so they understand the why.
Yeah, great feedback. And actually, kind of a question coming in from the audience, kind of right on that point, a little bit off topic, but on the point we're just making. How do you ensure cybersecurity for employees working from home? And I'm assuming ensure as in provide insurance. Any comment or feedback there? Maybe Paul?
So Sanjit, let me just make sure. You said insurance as in like protect them, or how are we just making sure that they are secure when they come into our environment? Is that what I understand? Which one?
That's how I read the question. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so for us, we've gotten rid of VPN as an example. So when they're working from home, they only go through our reverse proxy solutions to get to us. So and if you don't, then you don't get in, period. And so, but we haven't taken it to the step to where we are now enrolling every device as, to make sure we're postured. We're trying to balance that, where is the cost and the impact around that? And can you use your own device? Can you use your home computer? And so we're trying to figure out where that right balance is which is the right amount of risk to take. And so right now, that's how we're doing it. We are just making sure that they're going through our security tools where we have visibility, we have complete view into what the traffic is and where they're going, and being able to put policies and processes in place through them. And as long as that's occurring, then they can get to our systems. And so that's kind of the model on how we're ensuring that. And then if they don't choose to turn our services on, then they can't come into to the corporate side of the house, right? So our biggest challenge is, as we mature, is progressing that into all cloud services that we have. And so, as tons of companies are doing tons of SaaS and maybe doing SaaS and they don't even know it, right? You got Box, you got Office 365, you got tons of various things that are out there that people just assume that it's, part of your company, but it's not. And how do you then now limit that traffic, right, to get there? And so we're heading in that direction. I think we'll get there soon.
Yeah, rogue IT probably keeps you up at night, I'm guessing. Eric, last question for you and Paul, just we're running short on time. What advice would you give the audience members as they think about digital experience, adopting digital experience monitoring tools? What would be some lessons learned, some best advice you would give the audience as to achieve some of the success you have?
Eric, do you want to go first?
Yeah, Eric. Well, yeah.
Okay,
go ahead, Eric.
I'll go. Well, I would tell you, digital experience is foundational to me. If you can't have your staff be productive and you can't, it's one of those, you can't improve what you don't measure scenarios. Now, I wouldn't tell you though that it's the first thing you probably need to do, but I would definitely encourage you to consider tools and capabilities that let you have that visibility. Otherwise, you're still going to be guessing, and guessing in today's game is not really acceptable anymore. So it's table stakes for me.
That's right. Yeah, when you invest a significant amount of money into transformation and the experience is poor, the tolerance level for that is awfully low. How about you, Paul? Any words of wisdom from the success you've had on digital experience?
Yeah, so we unfortunately, we tried to deploy a lot of tech and solutions before digital experience was even available to us. And the amount of pushback and user experience challenges we had, we definitely now, if anybody is going into that roadmap for them, I'd highly start with put your digital experience in front. So that way, as you roll out your services, and you have that visibility right up front, that it's a key component to be able to understand your customers. So that's one. Two, don't underestimate, depending if you're a brand new company starting off, that's one thing, but we're not. We're a 187-year-old company. So the fact that we have systems that are, old, and we got, various ways to do things for plants that have been here years and years, there's a lot of technical debt. So don't underestimate the technical debt that you could have out there. And so be aware that when you're rolling things out, the art of the possible with technical debt, static routes, host names, that are put into DNS entries. You got people that are working from home that are doing jump hosts that are on, solutions that aren't, the rogue. Go find those, identify those, because those will impact your customer as you start turning things off. And so you got to know what exists. You got to see what's out there and how things are configured, so that when you go through rolling your digital experience out and transforming, that they're going to impact your customers, and you can address it quickly.
Yeah, that's a great point. Technical debt, the debt collector is going to come at some point, right? We call it fragile versus agile. The more technical debt you have, the more fragile your infrastructure is. So you want to move away from that.